Well, welcome back to another session of 7th grade art and our project and our lesson on perspective, in this case 1-point perspective, since we have one vanishing point. So what we're doing with this project is simply trying to understand how the idea of perspective works, and also using the concept of foreshortening. Both of these only refer to how large or small an object appears to us as it gets closer or farther from us. A good example of foreshortening is the idea that a soccer ball at one end of the soccer field looks very small, but then somebody kicks it and almost immediately, right before it hits you in the face, it appears to be much larger. We know that the size of the soccer ball did not change, but its appearance did. So it takes up a larger part of our field of view. So if somebody were to kick a soccer ball from way down here, that soccer ball would look very small. But before it hit the front plane of this picture where we are standing, it would appear to be very large. Might even block out everything that we see in this picture. So that is the phenomenon we call foreshortening. And perspective is a version of that, where it is kind of more or less mathematically and logically organized so that it all seems to get smaller as it gets farther from us, until it gets to the vanishing point, and then at that time it just simply disappears from our vision. We know it doesn't disappear, it just disappears from our vision. Okay, so when we left off yesterday, we had finished this fancy building here with the signage and the fancy windows and such in it, and we had started our third building on the right side of the street. Now this particular building is rather complex. It's going to have three roofs on it, and they're going to be gabled roofs like this. Although I have experimented with the possibility of going with a gabled roof and then a curved roof and then another gabled roof. But I'm not completely settled on that yet. But what we will do is, this is going to be a wide building compared to many of the other buildings. It's going to be a warehouse of sorts, or perhaps a lumber store, something that's going to require a bit more space in it. Now this building was 4½ centimeters wide. If we make this 5 centimeters wide, for instance, it will still appear to be larger because it's farther away, and the building should get smaller as they get farther from us. Would make logical sense. We could even make a case that if this is 4½ centimeters wide and this is 4½ centimeters wide, it would also appear to be a larger building, simply because it has not gotten smaller in its width as it's gotten farther back towards the vanishing point. So these are complicated questions to try to answer here, but I think what we'll do is we'll just split the difference. We'll call it about 4.75. We'll go right between the 4½ and the 5, and we'll go at 4.75 centimeters, and we'll put a dot down here where our 0 would be if we had a 0 on our ruler. Alright, so now it is a bigger building. It is wider than the previous two buildings. So let's simply find our dot. And a lot of people like to take, I've been watching people do this for years, although I've never tried it myself until just now, or until this project. So place your ruler right up against that dot. Hold it perfectly straight up and down, vertical, parallel to these lines, parallel to the side of the paper. And this will be the far end of our building. And as you can see, when you look at it in relationship to the other buildings, it's quite a bit larger. Okay. Excuse me. Now we're going to set up our roofs, and then we're going to put several things on the front of this building. So we're going to go to the middle of our building, and right here we're going to make a dot. And we're going to, like we have done on our other roofs, we're going to do a layout line, or a antenna as it's typically called by the students. Let's make that antenna 5 centimeters tall. I think that'll be a good place to start. Now I'm going to draw pretty darkly. However, my advice for you all is to draw lightly so you can erase parts of this. So I'm going to put a tiny dot on the top of that antenna. Now I'm going to estimate now. You could measure, but I believe estimation will work in this case. Half that distance. And we're going to put a dot there. And then, just like this line, this antenna was 5 centimeters. This line, or this antenna, this layout line, will also be 5 centimeters. And you should draw lightly. You will have to erase parts of this later. Okay. We're going to do the same thing again. We're going to go from this dot almost to the end, well, not almost to the end, excuse me, half the distance to here, and place a dot. Then we'll take our ruler and we'll measure off 5 centimeters. Hold the ruler down firmly, strike a line. I'm going to make it slightly darker than you probably should, but it has to be able to be easily erased. So we should have a layout line in the middle, one halfway toward us, and then one that is halfway away from us on the building. Now we're going to add some more dots that we're going to use. Half the distance between these two, we're going to place a dot. Half the distance between these two, we're going to place a dot. Now this gives us something to aim at, because we're going to have to do this is going to be some tricky ruler work. So what we're going to do is go from the corner to the top to the dot. From the dot to the top to the dot. From the dot to the top to the corner. It's easy to say. It's not so easy to do. So we got to line it up so it's right on the corner of the building, aiming directly at our dot. Hold the ruler down, draw a line. See what we've done. We're going to repeat that, tilt it in the other direction. We're going to find our dot. We're going to find the top of the layout line and draw a line. We're going to do the same thing again from here to here. So we find our dot down here, set our ruler so we can see just the peak, and draw to the dot at the peak of the second roof. We're going to repeat that same process we did here, right here. Put our ruler, put our pencil on there, I guess. Park the ruler, make sure it is vertical, straight up and down. Not vertical, tilted slightly, so it's aiming directly at the dot is actually what I'm attempting to say. Okay, so it's starting to shape up what we're attempting to do here. We're going to repeat exactly what we did with the first two with this last one. So we go to the dot in the valley, rotate our ruler so that we can see just the top of the peak of the last antenna or the layout line, and then we do the same thing to this corner. We came from a corner, we'll end on the corner. Tilt your ruler so it goes directly from the dot at the top of the layout line to the far end of the building. So what we have here now is 3 roofs, and we're going to erase portions of this out immediately because it gets very confusing to the students if we don't do that right away. So I'm going to put my slip sheet down here so I don't smear my work, and I'm going to erase out the antennas that we drew at the beginning of this. Same thing in the middle of this. We should have 3 scalene triangles when we're done. Or are they isosceles? I think they're isosceles triangles. Tall and slender. So I'll bet they're isosceles. Have to go back and study geometry with all these shapes that we make. Okay, let's dust that off, and we should have 3 slender triangles, isosceles triangles. I'm going to go back and bold up some things. Probably not a bad idea at this time if you do. So I'm going to bold up that particular area of my building. Now how this will work next with our roofs, because we need, right now we've just got the front of them, but there is no actual roof surface like this. So we're simply going to draw a line, and then a short line, and then another short line, and we're going to use our ruler to do this. So I'm going to move my slip sheet, go to the very first peak, this one right here. If you must, put your pencil right there, park the ruler on it, make sure it's perfectly sideways, horizontal, parallel to the top of the picture, parallel to the bottom of the picture, parallel to the other roofs. Okay, make your mark. It should disappear behind the Victorian roof. And that looks pretty good. We're going to do the same thing again at the next roof. So if we hold our pencil there and we slide the ruler up and park it against that pencil, then we can see that dot just barely sticking out above the ruler. Hold the ruler down firmly and then make your mark. This one will be short and it will disappear behind this roof. And if we do the same thing one more time, we should get the illusion that there are 3 roofs on this one building. So pencil, make sure you got it in the right spot, slide the ruler up to it, hold it down firmly, straight horizontal, straight sidewards, and then it should disappear behind the previous roof. Just like that. Okay, so if you've got that, you've done it properly, and that's quite an achievement. Now, you can see how much larger this building, even though it's only 4 3 centimeters wide, 4 3/4 of a centimeter, you can see how much larger it looks in relationship to the other building. And so, even though we may not be adding much width to the buildings as we go down the street, they appear to be larger simply because they're taking up more visual space in the picture. Okay, I'm going to clean some of this up, and I'm going to take some of these dots out of here, and we're going to move on to the front of this building. If you've been able to keep up with where we're at right now, that's fantastic. And this is how the lesson is taught in the physical classroom as well. I instruct on the projection screen just like you are viewing it right now, and I typically will walk around and correct people's work between each portion of the buildings as we progress through the project, and it can take quite some time to get the entire class through it. Alright, now let's start doing some windows on this. So in this case, we're going to start at the vanishing point. We're going to put our top left corner of our ruler on the vanishing point. And we're going to rotate it up until we find the top of this window that's in the second building, like we've done before, but we will vary this each time, so it gets more complex each time. So we want to find the top of that window, get our ruler right up against it, and this is going to require perhaps a very sharp pencil. It's got to be parked on the vanishing point. We're going to draw a line that goes most of the way across the front of the building, just like our other windows, and it has to have a space on each side of it. I'm going to hold the ruler down on the vanishing point, rotate it downwards till we find the bottom of these windows. As you can see, they pretty much line up. So I've tried to make this understandable to people who may not have done it before, simply by giving you landmarks and then increasing the complexity of the piece of artwork each time we go along. So we try to start it simple and make it more complex. So look, next part, on the vanishing point, check here, bottom of the window, pretty much bottom of the window. We could probably, if you're really uptight, nudge it up there just a tiny bit. Now we're going to make another long line. This part of this line and this one should start one above the other. So just like the other windows that have been drawn, they're straight up and down when we close them up. So this is a nice long kind of a clear story window on the upper portion of this building. Let's close that window up with a nice vertical line. Same thing on the far end of the building here. Nice vertical line. Okay, that gives us a chance to kind of tune up a little bit of our erasings, if we must. Now, that window is more like a skylight. We're going to put in some larger windows that are more like display windows at this point. So we're going to take our ruler, park it on the vanishing point. We're going to use this window right here as our guide. So we're going to rotate up, make sure it's on the vanishing point, find the top of this window in the second building. And then we're going to, in this case, we're going to make 3 markings. And the one closer to us will be slightly larger. They should line up underneath these. So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to line it up underneath this, and I'm going to make a mark, but I'm not going to move the ruler. It's still pointing at the vanishing point. I'm going to go over underneath the next roof. I'm going to make a mark. And then I'm going to lift up, and there's a space in between these. I'm going to go over underneath the next roof. I'm going to make a mark. And it will not go all the way to the end of the building. So we should have 3 lines lining up here and here all the way to the vanishing point. When I lift up my ruler, you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, I got a little bit haphazard down here, so I'm going to have to tune that one up just a bit with my fancy eraser. If you've got a fancy eraser, you should use it. If you don't, that's too bad. So it goes line, space, line, space, line. So if you don't have a distinctive space in between these, you need to make sure that you erase it in such a manner that you do. Okay, so if we've got 3 roofs, we're going to make basically 3 windows. So we're going to park our ruler on the vanishing point. We're going to find the bottom of the window that we just were working in. And in fact, maybe we'll do this, because that might make these windows a little large. Let's go to the bottom of the stained glass window in the second building. And that will give us a little bit more room at the bottom portion of our drawing here. So we're going to line up with the bottom of the stained glass window. We're going to be lined up on the vanishing point with our ruler. And now we're going to try to make marks that line up underneath. This would be straight down to here, see? With our, and we've got to be very visually careful about this, that line up with the markings that we made in the line just above. And there's a space between each of them. And the sides of the lines should line up evenly with the parts above it. Okay, let's see what we got. Now, when we're working closer to the vanishing point, it does get tricky, and so you have to, go back and just check your work periodically and make sure that it's lining up pretty much the way it should, because otherwise you get these tilted looking windows and they just don't really look convincing. Okay, let me dust that real quick. So we should have something that's got a space, a line, a space, a second line, a space, and a third line. And we should have matching down here. A space, a line, a space, second line, space, third line, and yet another space. So the sides of the windows, like all the other sides of the windows, with the exception of our curved stained glass window, are perfectly straight up and down, or vertical. So I'm going to find the side of my first window, and if I've done it right, I will be able to line these up, just a little bit of the window peeking out from behind it. It's got to be perfectly straight up and down, vertical, and parallel to the side of the building, parallel to the side of the paper. So I get that one window such as that. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other end of that particular line, straight up and down, close up the window. Now, if parts of your window are incomplete, you simply touch them up. If parts of them sling out too far, you have to carefully erase that. We're going to do the same thing again. We're going to find the next window peeking out from behind our ruler, straight up and down. and then we'll check it to get it should be perfectly vertical. And we'll continue this process down here. So we'll have our ruler in the vertical position, straight up and down, parallel to the sides of the building, parallel to the other markings we've made. Okay. And then again, straight up and down. Now I notice there's a little bit of my window that's gone too far, so I gotta just carefully erase that off and perhaps touch it up. Very good. And we'll do the very same thing with the last window. So this is that foreshortening thing, even though it is perspective as well, where the objects that are getting farther from us appear to get smaller. Straight up and down, vertical. Same thing at the end, and you might be able to line it up with the end of your window down there, and just above it. So what we have is 3 windows. One of them could be a sign. One of them could be that there's a sale going on. One of them could be for lawn and garden. One for lumber. One for appliances. You know, you can use it and do it anyway. I think we can make it work out. Okay, now we're going to go back to one of these long slender windows again. So park your ruler on the vanishing point, rotate it up, and in this case we're going to be using the bottom just below the next line down from the stained glass window. So this line would be almost the top of this line over here in the very first building, so we can reference those like this. It looks like it's going to be perfectly horizontal, doesn't it? So on the vanishing point, lining up with the bottom, lining up with the top. Hold the ruler down. You want to make one long continuous line, a little bit of space on each side. We're going to rotate down just a bit. Make sure that ruler is on the corner, on the vanishing point. If we rotate down, we can find the bottom of the first window in the first building, right here. That's what we're looking at. And this won't be relevant right now. So this bottom of this window lines up with the vanishing point, and we're going to draw another line underneath it, similar to this. Okay. When we pull away the ruler, we can see that we've got a matching kind of a window here. So turn your ruler in a perfectly vertical position. It should line up with your previous windows, and we'll close that window. We'll come all the way down to the end of the building, and we'll do the same thing and line it up with our other windows, which makes it visually much more attractive. So this is one of the more complicated excuse me, buildings that we're going to make, and so now we're going to put in some doors. Now, since this is a larger building, we can make an argument that it might need larger doors, more overhead clearance than a typical 7-foot door. This would be a place more like a lumber yard, is the way I see it, or a hardware store, something like that. Okay, now let's take our ruler, place the top left corner on the vanishing point. Let's just experiment first of all with the size of the doors. If we were indexing or referencing the tops of the doors here and here, then these doors would look very, very small in my opinion. So we're going to kind of fake it a little bit by rotating upward, and we're going to find the bottom of this sign in the second building, the one with the stained glass window. The bottom of the sign. Going to hold the ruler on the vanishing point, and this should give us adequate sized doors that don't look too strange because they're large of some sort. So underneath this line, if we can make that happen, we'll draw a line. We're going to lift up and go all the way down, and underneath this window I'm going to draw another line. And this should be the lintel of our doors, meaning the tops of the doors. So from here, we're just lining up with this, we're lining up with this, lining up with this and this. Let's see what we've got. I think that will look fine. Man, my voice is very stressed, people. I've been making too many videos, So let's bold those lines a bit. Bold these lines a bit. And just like our other doors, they will be perfectly straight up and down, vertical. And we should be able to line it up with our previous windows. So if we can see this, this, and this, we should be able to see just a little bit of the door peeking out from behind it. And we'll make it parallel to the side of the building, side of the paper, perfectly vertical. And that is our first door, the jamb of our first door. And we'll move on to the next one. And it should be pretty evenly lined up with this window up here. I may have to do a little erasing right there. A little too excited there. Okay, we'll do the same thing down here. We'll find this line, put our ruler against it, we'll transfer it down here. And we'll do the same thing yet again on the far side of the last window. Hold it down firmly, make sure it's perfectly vertical, straight up and down. And there we have a building with several complex features in it. And I think that we're going to leave it like that. Although we could make it more complicated, and when you go to the detailing portion of this, you will. So, we're going to move on to our final building on this side of the street. And in this case, we're going to have to measure off, let's see, our alleyway across the street was 1 1/4 centimeters. In this case, I think we're going to have to go with just 1 centimeter. So let's find pretty much the middle of our building we just drew, and we're going to measure off 1 centimeter. Could even be a skinny centimeter. We're going to take that 1 centimeter, we're going to orient our ruler perfectly straight up and down. I'm going to draw a vertical line, just like we've done between every other building. Where the bottom of that line meets the tilted line going to the vanishing point, we rotate our ruler and it will disappear behind the previous building. Now this is the front corner of the last building we're going to draw. Erase out the portion where the alleyway is at, or the space between the buildings, if you just like to think of it that way. It doesn't have to be an alleyway. It could be another street. A lot of people see it that way, and they put street signs on these drawings. We will do the same thing that we did here, up here. So if you're the kind of person who likes to put your pencil there, and I see that a lot, put it there, slide your ruler up to it, turn it, make sure it's perfectly horizontal, and it should disappear behind the 3-roofed building. We'll erase that off so it doesn't look like there's a wire in the alleyway. And we'll carefully dust away the scraps of eraser. I've got to kind of still clean this up, as when I draw very heavy, it's difficult to keep the drawing from getting smudged up. Okay. Now this is going to be like a courthouse or a school building or a library or a church, I suppose. It's really, you know, kind of up to the person that's making the building what it will become. I'm just showing you how to draw them. Okay, from our vanishing point. This time we're measuring from the vanishing point, the center of the vanishing point. We're going to come over 1 centimeter, and we're going to place a mark right there. This will be the far end of our building, and it actually looks larger than it really kind of is. So we're going to place our ruler on that mark we just made, 1 centimeter from the vanishing point, and we're going to make a vertical line. Now, just the same way we did with our flat roof building across the street, we're going to erase the upper line, but we're going to leave the lower line in there. Okay, now as you can see, ironically, this portion of the building is farther down the street than across the street, so that gives it a little bit of variation. That's a good thing. I'm going to go ahead and darken up some of my lines here so they're visible on the video. And you should have something like this. So we're starting to get that look of a city and a city street with buildings on either side of it, and all of them having their own different purposes and various missions in the city. Okay, let's, what was that? One dot is driving me nuts. There we go. So once again, now this will be a typical gable roof like this one, and I guess similar to these. However, it will also be kind of not very tall. It's going to look like a church or a school building, an old school building, or a city hall or a library. That's what most people think of this as. So in the middle of our building, I'm going to come across here to the middle. I'm going to place a dot right in the middle of the building where we can do our layout line. And then we're going to use our centimeter scale of our ruler. And we're going to only go up about 3 centimeters this time. So we'll put the 3 on the dot. And make our layout line, or an antenna. Most people seem to think of it that way. So if we put a little dot on the top of our antenna, and then all we got to do is use our ruler to connect the corner to the top of the antenna, or the layout line as it's technically called. And we'll do the same thing on the other side, from the far corner of the building to the top of the layout line. Okay, now you can see, although that building is far away, it appears to be quite large. And that would be appropriate if it were a school, or a church, or city hall, or a library. Okay. I'm going to re-darken that line. It's messing with me. Okay, now in this case, it will disappear just like these roofs do, just like this roof and this roof does as well. So we're going to take the top of our ruler, find the top of our building, slide the ruler up against it, make sure that it is perfectly sideways, horizontal, and then draw that line so it disappears behind the previous roofs. And we should have something that is quite impressive down there at the end of the street. Now, there's some other things we're going to do with this as well. We're going to put a long, slender, pointy object on the top of it, known as a steeple. Some people put flags on it, some people put religious symbols on top of it, some people put a bell in this. It's up to a clock. I've seen that done also. So we're going to start right here at the front of the building, the top left corner of the building, and we're going to come just slightly off the top of the front of that building and put a dot. We're going to use this dot to make a measurement. And in this case, we want this to be taller than anything else in the city. So we're going to measure off, I'm going to say 6 centimeters. Alright, and it's got to be perfectly straight up and down. This can look strange if it's not done this way. Okay, 6 centimeters. So we place the 6 on the dot, hold our ruler down, and simply draw a line. Now my line is bolded a little bit. Yours should not be quite so bold. Like we've done with everything else, we're going to start with the top. I'm going to draw to the front of the building. Accurately. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side of our layout line, which will make us have to work a little backhanded. So we're going to put the dot, that's the end of our session. Let's put the dot at the top there, lay the ruler on it. We want this to be a very slender triangle, equal on both sides, if we can make that happen. Okay, here we go. I'll hold it down firmly, so I'm working backhanded. And some people like to leave the line in there. They say it makes it look more three-dimensional. I can kind of see where they're coming from, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to believe it looks that way. Alright. Well, we've had a pretty successful day here, this session. So in our next session, we will simply finish our building here, our last city hall or our library or our church, and we will then begin our sidewalks, and we may even complete the background at that time. And then for the next few sessions after that, it's simply going to be decorating this town up with some sort of a theme, some activities going on in it, and preparing it for to add color. And that's going to be where we'll be going in the next couple of sessions here. So thanks for your attention, and I will see you next session.